Welcome back. Next up, we're going to switch gears a little bit and start talking about Midjourney, which has nothing to do with ChatGPT. It is a model that generates images. We give it text prompts and it generates pretty incredible images. It's honestly magical. In the same way ChatGPT feels magical at times when it gives you, very useful outputs or answers questions and it feels like the future, Midjourney feels like the future in the world of art or images. It is a really fun tool to use. So the point of it is that it generates images from text prompts. And there's a couple things you have to know. First of all, unlike ChatGPT, Midjourney requires some very specific prompting techniques where there are actual parameters and specific names of things you have to use when you're prompting it. ChatGPT is this massive open-ended thing. You can ask it whatever you want. When you're working with Midjourney, there are specific parameters that the model is expecting. So there's some more technical details that you need to know in order to write good prompts. But if you can write good prompts, you can do things like, here's the Midjourney homepage, by the way. If you go to their showcase section, you can generate images like the ones you see here, ranging from photorealistic imagery to hyper stylized, illustrations and watercolors and oil paintings and 3D renderings of pretty much anything you can think of. And there's a huge range of styles, right? We have like 3D little renders here of animated characters. We have, I don't know if this is an oil painting or neo-expressionism painting. But then we have things that look like photos, things that are very stylized. And these are just examples on the showcase page, line drawings. And if you hover over each one, you can see the prompt that was used to generate it. Let's look at this one here. This says a cute lion, emoji pack, expression sheet, multiple poses and expression, studio light, high detail. Let's take a look at something totally different. How about this one here? Coloring page, cute kitten with glasses on top of a book, abstract style, thick lines, low detail, lines only, no shading. And then finally, how about this here? An image of a steak dinner image. Food photos, steak photo stock, a huge cut of delicious steak on a wooden board. The prompts actually get cut short in the showcase. There's probably more to this prompt and there's specific parameters that are used that we can't see. But the point of this video is just to showcase some of the really cool things you can do with Midjourney, right? A huge variety of creative applications. In fact, I'm going to use it to make the image for this course and a lot of the imagery in this course. And it's very popular for creating marketing content, creating social media content, but also generating art. The next thing you have to know about Midjourney is that the only way to communicate with it, the only way to get images generated is through the Midjourney Discord bot, which we'll set up and talk about very soon. If you're not familiar with Discord, it's a chat application. It's free. And unfortunately, Midjourney itself is not free. That's a separate topic in just a moment. But Discord is. And as of now, there is no web-based interface to work with Midjourney. With ChatGPT, we just go on to chat.openai.com and we talk to the model. That is not the case with Midjourney. There's a few more hurdles you have to jump through in order to work with the model, but it's definitely worth it, especially once you learn the different parameters, the correct ways of prompting the model. You can get some really amazing output, as we just saw. The one catch, as I've already mentioned, is that it's not free, and there is no free tier anymore. There used to be a free tier, just like we have, ChatGPT Plus and then regular free ChatGPT if you don't pay. There no longer is a free tier at all for Midjourney. You have to pay to use it. And I believe there's two reasons why there is no longer a free tier. One is abuse. Midjourney and these image generating models have a high potential to be misused. And people were getting free trials and doing all sorts of absurd things, creating harmful content. That's all that I'll say about it. There's lots of examples and posts you can find online. And then the other reason is that Midjourney is extremely popular. And as we'll talk about, it requires GPU resources and cloud computing resources every time we generate an image. So it's expensive. All that matters for us is that there is no free option anymore. So if you don't have a credit card, if you don't have the ability to sign up to use Midjourney, which right now starts at $10 a month for the basic plan, if you don't have the resources or the desire to pay $10 a month, unfortunately, you can't use Midjourney. However, in the next couple of videos, I'm going to show you some alternatives that aren't quite as good in my opinion, but they are free, or they at least have a free tier. So soon we'll get started with Midjourney. Next, we're going to talk about DALL-E and Stable Diffusion. The first of the Midjourney alternatives that we'll look at is DALL-E 2, which is a model put out by OpenAI. It's not entirely free, but there's a free tier. You get access to a certain number. It used to be about 25 images for free that you can generate, and then you have to pay to buy credits. But it is free to some extent. DALL-E 2 is put out by OpenAI, so if you have an OpenAI account, you don't need to do anything else fancy to get access to it. This is the marketing page, openai.com/DALL-E 2. But the actual interface where we interact with the model and create images is located, if you click Try DALL-E 2, it's located at labs.openai.com. So what you'll see here, and a lot of you have probably played around with DALL-E, it got very popular pretty early on before tools like Midjourney really took off. So it was all over social media, lots of TikToks about DALL-E. It is a model that takes text prompts and spits out images. It just doesn't perform as well as Midjourney. Nowhere close, to be honest. So here are some example prompts that we can play with, some demonstrations, and a lot of them are pretty good. But if I just try and come up with my own prompt, or even just click the surprise me button, abstract pencil and watercolor art of a lonely robot, expressive oil painting of a basketball player, a fortune-telling Shiba Inu, reading your fate in a giant hamburger digital art. Let's try that one. It takes a bit. It generates me these 4 images, which are impressive. But if we compare that to the type of output we can get from something like Midjourney, it doesn't quite stack up. Another thing to know about DALL-E is that there is an API. So if you're a developer, you can programmatically generate images using DALL-E, which Midjourney does not currently support. But let's just take one of these Midjourney showcase images, like this one right here. This sort of photorealistic, I don't know exactly what it is, an evil female angel. Let's just copy this exact prompt and try running this over here with DALL-E. Now, some of this language is tuned specifically to work with Midjourney. Now, it's going to complain that it doesn't follow the content policy, probably because it says flirty core. Let's just get rid of flirty core. And that should follow the policy, hopefully. Interesting that flirty core is disallowed on DALL-E 2. I mean, this is the type of output we get. Nowhere near as good. Now, that's kind of an unfair comparison because, as I said, this prompt was probably tuned specifically by the person who wrote it to work with Midjourney, not to work with DALL-E. But honestly, this is somewhat indicative of the type of output I tend to get from DALL-E. So I don't mean to just sit here and say terrible things about it. It's still very impressive. It just doesn't tend to work as well. It is not as polished. The images we get are far less detailed, and we have way less control over the images. We really don't have many parameters we can play with DALL-E. It's a very simplified version of what we can do with Midjourney. But it does support a free tier where you can make some images without having to pay. Other than that, if you are willing to pay, I would definitely recommend using Midjourney, which is why we'll be focusing on Midjourney. In the next video, we'll take a look at one more free image model before we dive into Midjourney. Next, we'll look at a second model that generates images from text, and it also is free to use, or at least has a free tier. And beyond that, it's actually open source. The name of this model is called Stable Diffusion. The team behind it, the company, is called Stability.ai. And the key difference here between Stable Diffusion and Midjourney is that Stable Diffusion is completely open source, meaning that you could run the model on your own hardware if you had the necessary hardware. It's not made to run on, an everyday laptop, but it's completely open source. You can run it yourself. You can tweak things. Midjourney is completely closed off. You can interact with Midjourney just like we can interact with ChatGPT. We can write crazy prompts and get hopefully the results we want, but we don't have access to the actual underlying model. So with that said, in general, I've found that Midjourney gives better results out of the box. Stable Diffusion is still very powerful. It's a big step up from DALL-E, from DALL-E 2 that we just saw in the previous video. And you don't have to download it and run it yourself locally, which is not that easy to do, as I've mentioned. There is a web-based client. called Dream Studio. If you click on this, we see some nice example images, and a lot of them are pretty good. We get some decent output just from this Dream Studio interface. So I'm just going to click Dream over here, where I have a prompt that was written for me. You can just write some or shuffle the prompt if you want. Powerful sorceress, flowing robes and mystical staff, standing in dark and ominous forest, mysterious, detailed, high detail, fantasy, portrait. So I logged in, and I'm actually a paying customer. You can see I've generated tons of images over the recent months, but you don't have to pay money. You will get a certain number of credits for free. Now let me try and zoom this in so we can generate this prompt. So this time it's slightly different. A wise wizard with a long beard, a mysterious tome. All right, let's generate that. By default, we get 4 images. Wait for this to finish. And here we are. We got 4 different images of wise wizards with long beards. And then we can do a whole bunch of things. We can generate variations off of a specific one of these images. We can tweak a couple of settings around the aspect ratio or more advanced settings here, where I can change the number of generation steps. There's a bunch of things we can do. And this works far better than DALL-E 2 in my experience, but I find it still easier to get better results quicker out of Midjourney. But remember, there's a big distinction. Midjourney is completely closed off. It's made to give you really high quality images relatively quickly, whereas Stability AI's products, specifically Stable Diffusion and Dream Studio, are more customizable. They're more developer friendly. They're open source. You can run them locally, so you can really customize them a lot more. There's also, if you run the models yourself locally, you won't run up against any sort of content restrictions. You can do whatever you want to whatever purposes, positive or negative, nefarious or not. And Midjourney has all sorts of guardrails that you definitely can't do the same sort of content generation that you can achieve using Stable Diffusion. Not that that's how I recommend you use the models, but that is a key distinction. And of course, if you just need something quickly and you don't want to sign up and pay anything at all, you just want to play around with some of these models, Stable Diffusion and specifically the Dream Studio are a great way to get a limited number of images for free. With Midjourney, we don't have a choice. You have to pay to use Midjourney as it stands right now. But I believe it's worth it for the everyday user. If you're a developer, if you're someone who's going to really dive into the weeds, you can go a long way using Stable Diffusion and not having to pay a cent if you run it locally. But for most people out of the box, Midjourney will work better. All right, so let's go ahead and get set up with Midjourney. Remember, this is only available currently to paid subscribers. So unfortunately, if you don't have a credit card, unless they decide to re-enable free trials, you are out of luck, which sucks. Let's just be clear about that, especially just when you want to try things out. But I do believe it is worth the money, at least to try on the lowest tier, $10 for 1 month. Cancel it if you want to, if you're not impressed or you don't have a use for it, or try using Stable Diffusion. So to sign up, remember this is done through Discord. So if you go to the Midjourney website, you can click join the beta and it will take you to a Discord link to join the community. Now I've already joined the community. I have a Discord account set up. If you don't have a Discord, it will ask you to sign up. Discord itself is free. Joining the Midjourney server is free as well. This is what it looks like. This is the Midjourney server. It has like 17 or 18 million people who have joined. There's between 1 and 2 million people active at any given point in time. It's a very, very active server. And I'll just give you a quick overview of some of the stuff you'll see in here. There's an announcements channel. This is all just announcements coming from Midjourney, surveys and notes about office hours. There's a status channel that talks about any outages with the Midjourney bot. There are channels for technical support. There's channels for showcasing things people have generated. And then there are the newbie channels. So you will certainly see, or almost certainly see, different numbers here. Newbies 21, 22, it might be 99, but it doesn't really matter. If you pick any of these newbies channels, this is a place for newcomers to play around with Midjourney. And what you'll see is a bunch of images scrolling by. Let's go down to the bottom as people play around and generate new images. So it's kind of hectic and chaotic, and we'll see a way around this where we can just directly message the Midjourney bot. But the problem we have right now is that we're not actually set up, we're not subscribing, and so if I try and generate an image, it will complain to me and tell me you need to sign up. The easiest way to sign up is to run the /subscribe command. So /subscribe inside the Midjourney Discord on any channel. If you run this, it will generate you a link to open your particular subscription page. So this is private, as it says, only you can see this, so it doesn't really matter if I'm doing this in a public channel. And I've already subscribed, but once you click this link, it takes you to the Manage Subscription page where you can set up your subscription. Currently, there are 3 tiers. There's the basic tier, the standard, and the pro. I've just been using the basic plan and it works fine, but there are obviously distinctions, mostly in terms of how many fast generations you get or how many hours of fast generations you get. That's something we'll talk about in a separate video, the distinction between fast and relaxed. Also, on the free tier, you're limited to around 200 image generations. So I haven't hit that limit and I've been using it for a couple of months now and haven't had any trouble, but it's kind of a substantial increase from $10 to $30 a month. It's also substantially cheaper to pay yearly, right? It's $8 a month instead of $10 a month if you pay for the entire year. But that's kind of a big commitment if you're not sure. So we'll talk about the distinctions really around fast and relaxed generations. Otherwise, things are pretty similar. If you pay for the pro plan, there's 12 concurrent fast jobs compared to 3 concurrent fast jobs, but that's mostly it as far as the distinctions between the tiers. So I would just start with the $10 basic plan. So you'll set up your information, right? Credit card, billing stuff, all of that, and you should be good to go. At which point you can head back to Discord and we can get started generating our very first images. All right, so now that we have our Midjourney account set up, we have subscribed, we now can start generating images. So the way that we do this is the only option to interact with Midjourney is via Discord through a chat-based interface. There's no web app at the moment. There's no mobile app. They're working on it. But for now, it's all done via Discord. So I would recommend starting with one of the newbies channels, which is the whole point of these newbies channels is that it's a place for you to play around as a newbie and try and get a feel for how Midjourney works. Although in the next video, I'll show you an alternative. We can actually directly chat with the Midjourney bot. Now, the way that we generate images is by using the /imagine command. And /imagine then needs to be followed by a prompt. So whatever you want can go in here. Imagine, and then let's do, I have no idea. How about a turtle with grass and moss on its back? And then you hit enter. This will enter the queue, and you'll see it's waiting to start. It can take somewhere between 10 to 60 seconds to generate the images. And shortly, we should see something start to appear. And it's not going to look great at the beginning, right? We see sort of blurry looking images, but it will adjust as it adds steps to the generation here. It will refine the images. And eventually, we wait and we wait some more. And things are getting a little bit better, right? As you can see, the quality increases. Other people are generating things, so there's a whole bunch of stuff scrolling by, but here we are. Here's our final generations. I'll click on them and we can see we get 4 images. Each image is a square. Now, these are decent, right? They look good. Some of them, all of them include a turtle on moss, and that's not exactly what I wanted, even if there is some moss on the back or the shell of the turtle. And this is a problem that you'll run into all the time with pretty much any image generating model. They don't understand English all that well. They understand individual keywords, but not necessarily the relationship between the words. Things like moss on the back of the turtle. We'll learn more about the best practices when it comes to prompting Midjourney. There are some really important tools and some, I won't call them hacks, but tricks that you can use. Either way, we got our first 4 images. We always will get 4 by default, and they're always going to be square by default. Well, at least for now. Maybe that will change in the future. We can change the aspect ratio. We can tweak all sorts of parameters. But for now, that's our first example. Let's try one more. So we run /imagine, and then after that, we include our prompt. And let me just show this one more time. When I run /imagine and I hit space or click on this for a required option, it's including this. I'll just show one more time. I'll hit space here. It's including this prompt little text box for me. It's just a place for me to write the prompt. So I'm not writing the word prompt myself. It just put that there. So let's try one more. Maybe we'll steal one from the showcase and see what we get. So let's find a prompt on the community showcase, something that is short, because a lot of these get cut off because they're long prompts. Why don't we try just taking some of this? So this one is holographic art, fluid forms of a cosmic entity in the style of James Nares, intense interplay of light and shadows. And there's more to the prompt, but I couldn't copy it all. So we'll just start with that. Now we've entered the queue again, and it looks like we've already been passed by. Here it is. It's waiting to start. And eventually we'll see something. Okay, now it's started. And it's the same process as before, where it's going to start blurry and pretty unrefined, and then eventually get better and better until it's finished. And we have a rough approximation of how complete the generation is, 62% currently. Okay, so here we are. This is what we got. Quite a bit different than what was in the original showcase prompt that I copied. I imagine there was more to this prompt, guiding it to create a person's face, which we didn't really do. But that's just our first example. We haven't learned a thing about writing good prompts yet. We're just writing any prompts. To summarize, we use the /imagine command to generate images. We provide a prompt, it takes some time, things scroll by, it can be a little frustrating. So in the next video, we'll take a look at how we can directly work with the Midjourney bot. As we saw in the previous video, there's a lot of action on these newbie channels. Things scroll by super fast. It's easy to lose your generations and not know what's happening, or just have to scroll a bunch to find something you previously generated. It can be overwhelming. So what I prefer to do is to work directly with the Midjourney bot. So you should see over here a list of not all the users, there's like millions of users logged in right now, but the mods, and most importantly, the Midjourney bot right here. If you don't see this list, you can show and hide the member list right here. I'm going to click on Midjourney bot. And once you click, just a regular click, we can see that it gives me a dialog to message him here. I shouldn't say him, message it. Or you can right click and click on message, and it will take me to my direct messages on Discord. And now you can see my short little history with Midjourney bot on this particular Discord account. So just before recording this video, I generated 2 images, and this is done directly with the bot. So there's nobody else's stuff in here. This doesn't mean it's private, by the way. The images I generate are still publicly available on the showcase. That is something we'll cover in a separate video, but it does mean that I can see all of my work in one place. If you have trouble enabling the direct messaging, if you get some sort of error or you don't see the option to direct message the Midjourney bot, there's instructions on the Midjourney documentation that I'll link to that shows you how to enable direct messaging with the bot. It's just a simple Discord setting. So now I can run the imagine command in here. How about hand-drawn, close-up portrait, astronaut, with green eyes in, I don't know. Let's just start with that. So hand-drawn close-up portrait of an astronaut with green eyes. We have the same process where we wait. Eventually, we'll see something, but we don't have to deal with 100 or thousands of people's other images scrolling by. Okay, so here we are. We get our first little taste of what's to come, and then it gets refined, 15%, 31%. Keeps going until it finishes. Sometimes this can take a lot longer. Sometimes this can move pretty quickly. And 93%. And finally, does it finish? not quite. There we go. Okay, so now I can click and I can see the images here. Pretty good result for a very simple prompt. 4 different results, right? And this is something we're going to discuss more what these buttons do down here, how we can isolate a particular image and get variations on one of the images. But this video is just about direct messaging the Midjourney bot. It's what I'll be using in this course. It's just way easier. You can see what I'm doing, although it is fun to explore what other people are doing in the Midjourney server. Specifically, if you go further down to some of the daily themes, for example, where there's people working on the daily theme is arrow and or ace, and people are generating, really cool things like these ace playing cards, just as an example. And there's competitions that you can find. So it's definitely worth playing around and looking at the server itself. But when it comes time to actually generate images, I much prefer to work with my direct message to the Midjourney bot itself. The next thing we have to talk about is the fact that all of the images that we generate by default are publicly available. They all will, in some way, they can show up on the showcase. There's so many images I have yet to see my own images show up on the showcase, but you can see, here's a playing card one. Somebody's probably playing with that ace challenge that I just showed you, the daily theme. And as you refresh, new images eventually show up here. So this could include all of the images that I generate. Everything that we do is publicly available, including any images that I generate in private messages. Just because I'm privately messaging the Midjourney bot, that doesn't mean that my images that I actually generate are private. Nobody can see them on the Discord itself, on the actual server here. They're not scrolling by like all these other images, but they are still publicly available on the showcase. So there is an option to use stealth mode. However, it's only available to Pro plan subscribers, which is the $60 a month tier. So I don't have access to it with $10 a month. $30 a month for the basic or for the standard plan doesn't give you access to stealth mode either. You have to pay for the Pro plan. So you can try using the command /stealth, which will take us to stealth mode. But in my case, it will just tell me you don't have access to stealth. Your current membership plan doesn't include private mode. Upgrade your plan to gain access to private mode. If you do have private mode, if you enable it using /stealth, the images that you generate in stealth mode using Imagine will not be available publicly. They still will show up though, if you are doing them publicly in the server, in a public room or a public server, rather than doing it in the direct message to the bot. So that's all there is really to say about stealth mode. You can also leave stealth mode by typing /public, but this won't apply to most of you, including myself, because I don't pay for stealth generation with the $60 tier. So the point here more so is that anything you do is publicly available, and just keep that in mind. And it kind of ties into the next topic we'll cover, which are the content guidelines. This will be a super quick video. I just want to run through the community guidelines put out by Midjourney, which is a pretty important part of working with Midjourney. It is a great image generating model. However, you cannot use it to generate anything that you might want or anything you can imagine, which hopefully you're not trying to generate gore and abusive content or shocking and disturbing content. But there still are probably some legitimate uses that are shocking and disturbing that Midjourney is not going to allow you to do. So it is an open by default community, as we've already discussed. To keep the platform accessible and welcoming to the broadest number of users, content must be PG-13. So they have rules set up so that you can't generate things with adult content and gore, anything visually shocking with disturbing content. Certain prompts will just be completely blocked, although there are ways you can sometimes get around it, but your images are public, remember, so it is something you want to be cautious with. If you really need to generate gory, creepy, abusive content, which I hope you don't, but if you need something with less rules, there's always models like Stable Diffusion, which you can run locally on your own machine, as we've already discussed. It's one of the big advantages of Stable Diffusion, if you do have the proper hardware to run it locally. Anyway, there's more details about what's considered gore. They don't want detached body parts, cannibalism, blood, violence, deformed bodies, severed limbs, pestilence. They don't want nudity, sexual organs, naked breasts, people in showers or on toilets. And there's a whole bunch of other things, obviously, around racism, homophobia, other disturbing content. And one thing that is important to note that this also applies to anything involving celebrities or public figures. If you're trying to generate anything inflammatory or offensive, that's against the community guidelines. Now, these standards do evolve, and if you go back and read some blog posts about the early days of Midjourney, there was some definite misuse of Midjourney early on. So these standards are pretty strictly enforced. So keep that in mind. If you're trying to generate nude fan art of celebrities, you're not going to want to use Midjourney for that. You'll want to use a different model. Same thing with violent content and anything inflammatory. So hopefully that goes without saying, but if you have questions, you can find the community guidelines on the Midjourney documentation under Getting Started, Community Guidelines. Okay, so the first thing we need to talk about are the different versions of the Midjourney model. It started with V1, but we are currently, as of recording this, at the beginning of July 2023, version 5.2 was just released. So you can figure out what the current version is, the default, by using the /settings command, and it will be selected in green. You can see we have a couple choices, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 5.1 and 5.2. By the time you watch this, it's likely that there will be other versions here. And if there's anything significant, massive updates, of course, I'll redo the course or at least the important relevant videos. 5.2 was just released like 5 days ago. Before that, we had 5.1 as the default version. Before that, 5 was the default version, and so on. And we have access to the previous versions, although I rarely use any of these. Sometimes I will switch to 5 deliberately, and rarely I'll switch to 3, because sometimes it's a little bit better at building interesting compositions. So I'll start with that, and then I'll feed my image back to a newer version like 5.2. But that's a much more advanced concept. What matters now is that we can see what the default version is. It should be already selected for you, the most recent, most likely, unless they decide to roll back for some reason to 5.1. The current default is 5.2. So let's go through a little journey in time. Here is the exact same prompt. Imagine a treehouse castle. I didn't say anything about the style, the colors, the composition, the lighting, nothing, just treehouse castle. Every Midjourney model has some basically pre-baked style preferences. Each model has its own bias or tendencies towards a particular style based on how the model was trained. And with V1, you can see that our treehouse castle is not at all photorealistic. It's not very 3D even. It's kind of like collage looking, flat. The lighting is not very interesting or dynamic, but of course this is V1. So here's the same prompt run with V2, treehouse castle. The lighting is a bit more dynamic. Things look slightly more 3D, but not photographic at all. If we compare them, the resolution maybe is a little bit better, not quite as pixelated, but still not great. Then we move to V3. Kind of in the same vein, it's better, but it's sort of pixel art looking by default. It's more colorful, but not anywhere near the type of output that we get today. Then we go to V4, which was a significant improvement, where things definitely, by default, look more realistic, more 3D, maybe a bit more photographic or 3D render-ish, less flat. Let's just leave it at that, compared to V1. And then V5 is the biggest difference, the biggest jump, in my opinion, because V5 was trained basically to favor a more photographic style by default. And it actually is still the most naturally photographic model version. We can get really good photograph looking images with 5.2, but what's interesting is that V5 has a stronger tendency towards photographic looking images by default. I didn't say I wanted a photograph. I don't want a hyper realistic treehouse castle. I just said treehouse castle. V5 is the most photographic currently. If we look at 5.1, which doesn't seem like much of a difference in terms of model numbers, but if you look at the results, things are less photographic, more fantastical, more stylized, more over the top, more sort of over the top lighting. It's prettier, but less photographic looking. These look like they could be real, in my opinion, or close to real. These look like something from a video game or something from a fancy, Marvel movie or something maybe. But this doesn't mean that we can't use 5.1 or 5.2 to make really good looking photographic images. This is solely about the individual model versions baked in preferences towards one style or another. And that brings us to the most recent version and the current default as of right now in July 2023, version 5.2. So again, it's very stylized, beautiful, great lighting, dramatic, but it looks like something out of a video game, or some sort of 3D render. It doesn't quite look real. It's over the top. It's stylized. We can turn that down. We can control that as we get better with our prompts. All that I did as a control here is imagine a treehouse castle, nothing else. Now let's go back to V1. Compare that difference. A treehouse castle in V1 to a treehouse castle in V5.2. Pretty significant difference. Okay, so that's just a quick rundown of the history of the models, a little progression of how much they've improved over time, and I'm sure they will continue to get much, much better. Now, if we go to Discord, remember that you can always check on the model version that you have currently selected by using /settings, and then you can dismiss this if it bothers you to have it sticking around. So the default setting for me right now is using 5.2, and if I imagine something, let's do a field of tulips at sunset. This will use version 5.2 because that's what I have selected in my settings. But I could switch that up. If I go to /settings, I can change that version. Maybe I want to use version 5. I'm going to rerun the same prompt. So /imagine a field of tulips. Let me make sure I match the language exactly. No, field of tulips, sunset. Okay, field of tulips, sunset. This is now using version 5. Because I have version 5 selected in my settings, it will stay that way until I change it. Now, that's not the only way to change the version. This is just the way that you can continuously use the same version for all of your prompts, because now everything will be V5. Or if I selected V1, everything would be V1. But we can change the version number on a prompt by prompt basis using the -- version or --v parameter. By the way, you can see that this is our 5.2, the most recent version, where they look beautiful, but it almost looks like an illustration. Again, over the top. If you look at the tulips here, it's not really a photograph. It looks like something that's been drawn or painted or made in, some sort of 3D tool. If we look at V5, which has a more photographic style by default, I'm not saying these look like perfect photographs, but it's more photographic than 5.2. But we can coach the model and tell it we want a photograph, or that we want an over-the-top 3D render, or that we want an anime, or whatever we want, a cartoon, an oil painting. We have full control over that. This is solely about what the model tends to prefer if you don't guide it otherwise. Okay, so back to the version parameter. Notice when I selected V5, or let's do V1. Let's go way back in time, and let's run the same prompt. So imagine, and then field of tulips, sunset. Notice what it adds to the end of my prompt. --v, and then a space 1. This prompt says I want a field of tulips at sunset using version 1. So the parameter --version, or for short --v, which is what most people use, accepts a version number after it, separated by a space. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 5.1, and 5.2. If you use this at any point, you can change the version used within a prompt, and it won't impact future prompts. It's only for that one prompt. So if you look at my slides, that's exactly what I did. Imagine a treehouse castle --v5 using model version 5, --v4 use version 4, and so on, --v1. So you can do this if you want to try things with different versions, see how they look without having to go to the settings command. But if you want to consistently use the same version for some reason, you only want to use 5, you can select it here, and that will now be the default. But I'm going to go back to 5.2. It's the latest version, and it tends to work best. This is taking a while, so I'll be back when that finishes. And actually, before that, I should mention the parameter syntax is that parameters always go at the very end of a prompt. We'll learn more about parameters, but they all start with dash dash something. So this means that you should not start your prompt with dash dash v1 and then your text, a Jello spaceship. Instead, it should always be your prompt text, and at the very end, any parameters like dash dash v1. But again, there are many other parameters we'll learn. We'll talk about stylize, we'll talk about chaos, we'll talk about things like the no parameter. Any of those parameters, they start with dash dash, they all go at the end of your prompt. The only one we've seen so far is version. And my v1 of the tulips finished up. I ran it twice because it was taking so long, but this is what it looks like. So clearly a very big difference, right? Where I'm specifying the version 1, it does not look good compared to what we got when we specified version 5 or 5.2 or 5.1. 5.2 is the default here. Aside from the obvious stylistic differences and quality differences between versions, there's also been improvements made to certain areas where Midjourney and a lot of image models struggle, including, notoriously, the rendering of hands. Human hands have been a challenge for most image models, and Midjourney famously will add people or create people with 4 fingers, 6 fingers, 7 fingers, 3 fingers, especially with older versions. V5 onwards is better. It's not perfect. You still will often end up with somebody who has too many or too few fingers, but more often you'll get someone who has the correct number of fingers. So let me just demonstrate this just as another difference between models. It's not just about the quality of the images, the photographic nature, the artistic, style. That is important, and those are definite changes between models, but there's also subtler things, like another one is teeth, and another one is how the models handle text. They all suck at rendering text, let's be clear. But you have a bit more control over the text with more recent models. But the point is that there's more to the distinctions between versions than just what you see here. There's incremental improvements made. So let's do a prompt of 2 people shaking hands, and let's say a close-up of 2 people shaking hands. And I'll specify a version. Let's start with 3. I'll run this twice, and then I'll do 4 twice. So you see I've hit my limit of maximum number of concurrent jobs, and actually what's happening is that I have 2 jobs when I tried to do version 1 that got hung up for some reason. What I can do is cancel the job, and the way that you do it is a little odd, but you react with an X emoji. And that will cancel the job, so it's now gone. Let's do that to this one as well. X, if you ever get one that's stuck, now it's gone, and my other jobs begin. So I hit that queue limit faster than I should have because I had these other jobs that were just paused and broken for some reason. Anyway, these are now starting to come in. You can see with V3 to this one. Yeah, this one already finished. I mean, the fingers are just a garbled mess. It looks like, I don't even know, like ground beef or something awful. Now I'll try the same prompt, and I'll run this a few times with V4. And it will be better quality at least, but we're going to have a bunch of weird fingers as well. So I'll run that twice. Now I have hit the queue again, the limit, because I still have some jobs that are being processed, but I'm not going to cancel those yet. So here's my first batch of V4 images coming in. We have somebody, it looks like they have 2 thumbs. No, actually, I'm not sure what's happening here. This person looks like they have a thumb on their index finger. We have this person here with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fingers and then a thumb that's hidden on the other side. So, we're getting some weird stuff going on. Here's another example. Now we have a person with 4 fingers, 1, 2, 3, and then a thumb, and a very weird looking thumb. And same thing here, 1, 2, 3, and a thumb. So 4 fingers, 1, 2, 3, and a thumb. The point is, it's just not perfect at all at generating hands. Here's another example where this person has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fingers and a thumb. So not great. Now, if we use the latest default version, which is currently 5.2, I'll run that maybe twice. Here's our first batch of 5.2 hands. This person has 1, 2, 3, 4 plus a thumb. 1, 2, 3, 4 plus a thumb, although this finger still looks kind of weird. This person has 1, 2, 3, 4 plus a thumb. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's much better. It's still not perfect. Let's see. Does this? That's the right amount of fingers, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, okay. So we're in good shape with most of these. They might look a little weird, like this finger is kind of weird, but we're generally getting the right number of fingers. Just a quick illustration of that, a notorious issue that image models tend to have. Midjourney has improved in that between versions. So the version numbers, it's not just about how pretty something looks. There are more specific details, like how it handles teeth, how it handles fingers, and things like that have improved over time. And then the final thing we did learn in this video, I just used it as an opportunity to show you how to cancel a job. If you react to a job that's currently in progress using an X emoji, it will cancel the job and remove it from the queue. Next up, let's talk about what this group of buttons below each grid that we generate does. We have 9 buttons, but we have 2 sets of 4 buttons, U1, U2, U3, and U4, and then V1, V2, V3, and V4. In this video, we'll talk about the U buttons. This first row, U stands for upscale. So initially, with older models of Midjourney, the grid images would be generated at a lower resolution. So if I do something with V4, like, I don't know, let's imagine the happiest cat on the planet, and I'll use --V4. With V4, the individual images in the grid were generated at a resolution of 512 by 512 pixels. And then we could select one of them that we wanted to work with and upscale it using these buttons here, U1, 2, 3, and 4. And by upscaling it, it would increase the resolution to be 1024 by 1024. Okay, so our cat just finished, our happiest cat in the world, and this is with V4, just as a reminder, where the resolution is lower. These are 512 by 512 images. And then I could pick one that I wanted to upscale, basically make it bigger, higher resolution, and then also isolate it so that I could download it individually. Right now, I can save this image, but it's a full grid of all 4 cats. I could save that to my downloads, but usually you want to isolate one image that you like so that you can use it. And to do that, we have to click one of the upscale buttons. So the numbering here goes from 1 in the top left, then to 2, then 3 in the bottom left, and 4 over here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's say that I like this image the best here. It looks very happy. I want to upscale it so I get a bigger or higher resolution version. I will click U2, upscale image number 2 in the grid. This doesn't take very long usually, but it will take some time because for V4 at least, there's work involved. It is truly upscaling the image. With the more recent versions, V5, 5.1, 5.2, the initial image grids are actually generated where each image is already a high resolution 1024 by 1024. So when we click one of those upscale buttons with V5.2, for example, all that it really does is isolate the image. It gives us the image on its own, but it doesn't actually upscale it. So now I see a couple of buttons down here. We'll talk more about these later, although these are V4 buttons, so we won't spend too much time on them. But now I can save this image locally by right-clicking, save, or, well, I'll do that, I can click on this web button. And this takes me to the Midjourney website where I can see my image. I can then save it here if I want to. I can favorite it, so I have a whole list of favorited images where maybe we generate thousands over a couple of months, and it's hard to go through and view all of them, but I can favorite the ones that I like. So if I go back to my home here, you can see all of the new upscales that I've created. So these are upscales, as you can see right there. They're individual images. I can also look at all of the grids that I've generated. So here's all the handshakes that I did just a couple of was that last video. Here's the grid that generated my 4 happiest cats on the planet. Go to upscales, I only see the larger images that I upscaled myself by clicking an upscale button. Okay, so that's with V4. It does actually increase the resolution. You can see a little chart here that says version 4, the initial grid images are 512 by 512, then upscaled, they are 1024 by 1024. But with version 5 and beyond, they start at 1024 in the first place, 1024 by 1024 pixels. So upscaling them does not actually increase the size. And it happens very quickly compared to what we just saw with V4 because there's no real work that's being done. It's basically just isolating an image. So let's do a V5.2, just the default right now. Let me just make sure I didn't leave my settings toggled from, yes, okay, Midjourney version 5.2. I will imagine this time, I don't know, how about what should we do? The happiest fish in the ocean. Okay, so this is using version 5.2. I'll be back when this finishes. Okay, so, well, I guess we're still at 93%, but almost done. And I have this grid of my 4 images generated with V5.2. I can then pick one and upscale it. Let's take this one just because it's more distinctive, the color, so we'll remember it. And that would be 4, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is position 4 in the grid. I'll click U4 to upscale it. And this should happen very quickly because it's not actually doing anything beyond isolating the pre-existing 1024 by 1024 image. Okay, now I have this image. I can save it. Same deal. Right click, save image. Discord will ask me where I want to save it, or I can click the web button. I can even favorite the image from within Discord. Just click the website. It takes me to see the isolated image here on my on my Midjourney homepage. And then it should show up under my upscales tab where I see this one image that was upscaled. I can also see the prompt, of course. And then I can see all of my grids where none of these, well, very few of them have actually been upscaled. A lot of the time I'll generate a grid and I'm not happy with it, so why bother upscaling an image? There are more benefits to upscaling an image though, beyond simply isolating the image so that you can save it. In the next video, we'll learn more about generating variations. In order to generate variations on this image, I first have to isolate it by upscaling it. So whether you're using V4 or 5, there's some differences, and same would go for V1, 2, 3, and 4. There's some differences in how the upscaling process works, where with V5, the images are not actually resized. There's no true upscaling. They're simply isolated. But it's still important to do that because once it's isolated, we can zoom out of the image, we can generate variations of different degrees of strength, and we can play around with a particular image once we have isolated it by upscaling. Okay, and just remember these buttons go from 1, 2 on the top row, 3, 4 on the bottom row, left to right. Okay, so we talked about the upscale buttons. They all start with a U, U1, U2, U3, U4 for upscale. 1, 2, 3, 4 is the order of the images in the grid. But there are 5 other buttons, and the first one we'll talk about is this button right here. This is basically a re-roll button, regenerate the entire grid with the same prompt. So I don't want to do the V4 again. Let's do my fish, the happiest fish in the ocean. This is with V5.2. If I click this regenerate button down here, you'll see the same exact prompt with the same parameters, the same version is just run again. And it will generate me 4 new images in a grid. So it's not using any particular image and making variations on that. It's just running the prompt again from scratch. And this is something that you'll do pretty frequently if you're unhappy with the results. Midjourney often involves re-rolling, seeing if something works. You'll get a lot of variations between grids, especially as you increase some of the parameters that we'll learn soon, like chaos and stylize. And then maybe you'll update the prompt, change the prompt, but the first step often is just going with the same prompt and trying it a few times. It's rare that you'll get exactly what you want, ever, but it's also quite rare to get anything close to what you want on your very first attempt with a given prompt. Okay, so I'll be back when this finishes. Okay, it's almost done. We're at 93%, and I can already tell that I like this bottom left one, this, I guess, I don't know what that is, piranha-esque looking thing with the sharp teeth. If that's really what I wanted, I easily could have just written a prompt that said green fish, orange eyes, sharp teeth, whatever. But I'm happy with how it surprised me. I like this variation in this grid. Well, it's not a variation. I like this image in the grid. So now let's talk about these 4 buttons down here. The V buttons stand for variation, and the numbering system works the same, 1, 2, 3, and then 4 in the bottom right corner. I can generate variations off of one of these images, meaning it will generate me a new grid of 4 images. Let's go with this one here. It's the most distinctive. So that's number 3. I'll click V3. And this will make variations for image number 3 using the same prompt, but it will start with this basically as its starting point. And we should get images that are similar to this, but they're all going to vary quite a bit. And you'll see right here, it actually says variations strong in parentheses. There's another way that I'll show you shortly to make weaker or simpler variations that are not as strong. I'll be back when this finishes. Okay, our images are coming in, and you can see that they're all different, right? They're not clones of that initial one, but they're all similar to it. And I could keep going, right? This is an iterative process. Maybe I like the shape of this wave here and this, I guess they all have wide open mouths, but I like this one, so I want to keep going in that direction. It doesn't have such an orange spine, so I could generate variations on this. That would be image number 2, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. So I could click where'd this come from? That's an earlier job that just finished. Here we go, V2. And that would generate variations on this. But the other thing that I can do is first isolate an image using upscale. So let's pick, I guess I'll do this one just because it's distinctive. So that would be image 2. I'll upscale it. Remember, I'm using the default version right now of 5.2. So this is very quick because it's not actually redoing the image. It's not upscaling it. It's just isolating it. And now I have 2 buttons, very strong and very subtle. So this will get me a new grid of images based on this original image, either with a subtle variation or a strong variation on that image. So let's try both. I'll start with the subtle variation. And then I'll click very strong. And I'll be back, hopefully, when those finish. Okay, so here's our subtle variation. You can see already they look very similar to the original, right? We still have kind of the same exact composition, the same expression, same colors. There's some slight differences. It looks like we have fish down here and only bubbles over here. The rays of light are a little bit different. The color of the eyes changed a little, so far at least. And here's our strong variations. Quite different in terms of composition so far. Okay, so this is the subtle. It finished up. And whoa, something's going on with this eye over here. It's a little weird, but you can tell that these are pretty close to the original image that I upscaled first, and then I clicked very subtle. And then here's our strong variations. Still a lot in common with the original image, but the composition has changed. The expression has changed. I mean, the fish is now facing left to right in most of these, except for this one. Over here, in our subtle variations, it's facing right to left. And here we go. These are the stronger variations. So you have control. If you upscale first, you isolate that image, and this is specific to V5.2, I believe, and onwards. So not even V5, but just 5.2 and later. You now have these 2 buttons. Once you upscale, you can do a subtle variation or a strong variation. Either way, it's going to generate another grid, 4 separate images, and then you repeat the process. Maybe I really like this subtle one here that doesn't have those fish, just the bubbles, although this eye is freaking me out. So maybe I like the brown eyes or the orange color eyes. So I could then isolate that one by upscaling it. So I'd upscale 4, and then I could generate more subtle variations or strong variations. Okay, but let me show you what happens if I use an earlier version. So let's stick with our theme of the happiest animal. Let's do the happiest ostrich in the world. And this time I'm going to stick with V5. Which is still very new, but not as new as V5.2. So I just want to show you if you use earlier versions, we end up with something a little bit different once we upscale. All right, so the ostriches just finished up. Let's say that I like this one, this sort of comic close-up. So I'm going to upscale that. That would be number 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is with V5. Remember, I used --V5 in my prompt. And now I see something a little different. For the earlier versions of Midjourney, the buttons change a bit. Now I see make variations, but I don't see a make variations strong and a make variations subtle. So just know that with 5.2, we have that new option to make subtle versus strong variations. With earlier versions, we can still make variations, but not exactly in the same way. We don't have as much flexibility. It's just going to make me variations, just one button for variations. You'll also see a different set of buttons if you use V4. I don't know if there's a reason really to use V4 these days, but you should know that the buttons and functionality differ a little bit once you have upscaled an image, depending on the actual model number that you're using or the model version. At the end of the day, you can regenerate the entire grid with the exact same prompt using this button to re-roll it, or you can generate variations based on one of the existing images in the grid, and that will make 4 new images in a grid. Or you can upscale an image first, like we did here, where I upscaled this one. Once I upscale it with V5.2, I have 2 choices, strong variations and subtle variations. And then we have this set of buttons here that we'll cover in the next video. Next, we're going to talk about these zoom out buttons, at least these first 2. Zoom out 2 times, zoom out 1.5 times. We're going to leave custom zoomed for later because it's a little more advanced. You can actually zoom out of an image and rewrite the prompt at the same time using custom zoom. So we will learn that, but I'm just going to start with these 2 because they're simpler. So by clicking a zoom out button, which is only available once we have upscaled an image, once we've upscaled it, we can zoom out of the image. What that will do is not actually increase the resolution or the size of the image, but will regenerate images that are zoomed out based on the initial composition and reveal more stuff that might be outside the bounds of this composition. So it is not increasing the size, just don't have that misconception. It's not making the image bigger. It is simply changing the composition. So let's go with one of these ostriches. I already upscaled this one, so let's zoom out from this. I have 2 choices, 1.5 times zoom or double zoom. Let's do both. So I'll start with 1.5 times and then zoom out 2 times. And by the way, if you use custom zoom, you can change that number. You could do a 1.2 zoom, you could do a 1.8, but the maximum zoom currently is 2 times. All right, so we can see these are already starting and we have more of the image showing. This is 1.5 and this is our 2 times zoom down here. And you can already tell just from their little previews that this is zoomed out further, right? We see more of the ostrich, the full neck. We see more sky, more trees on the right and the left, more ground. This is kind of a simple one to zoom out of. It's just increasing the background. But if I did a more complex prompt, maybe isometric cyberpunk cityscape at night, neon colors. I just want to have more stuff happening. You'll see that you can get some pretty interesting results. And then once we cover custom zoom, again, that's coming later, we can do some really interesting things where you can completely rechange the composition. I could frame this in a picture on a living room wall, and then I could take that living room wall and zoom out further and have that actually be on a computer display. So we can do all sorts of fun things. Here's our initial image. Very tight. I think it's the strongest still. I think the composition's better. But then I zoom out. Here's our 1.5 times zoom out. And here is our double zoom. Okay. And I could keep going. If I upscale one of them, I could then select zoom on one of them and keep going. Let's take one of these images though, maybe this one here. So this is my isometric cyberpunk cityscape at night. I'll isolate this one. What number is that? 1, 2, 3, so upscale 3. And it should go quick. Now I'll zoom out double. And hopefully it completes more of this image. We see more cityscape, more buildings, maybe the road keeps going, who knows, but we should see more stuff. And then I can keep going. By the way, you can actually see the process here where there's the initial image kind of showing up as that square, and then things around it are being painted in as the image is generated. All right, so here is my zoomed out image, and it zooms way out, as you can see. Let's pick one of these to upscale, maybe this one, upscale 1. And here we are. There's our zoomed out image. So this road was continued. The buildings were continued. This thing is brand new right here. This is all new. Let's zoom out one more time. I'll do double zoom again just to get the biggest increase. and watch again. I won't make you watch the whole process of generating it, but watch as we see the initial image, the seed image, start in the middle of the composition. There it is. You can see the original image and then a bunch of blank space that's slowly being generated around it. All right, that finished up. One thing I've noticed is that the zoom grids sometimes look lower quality than the actual images are. It all looks kind of fuzzy and blurry, but if I isolate one of them, let's take 4, so I'll upscale 4, you'll see that it actually is pretty high quality. There we are. Okay, so let me do a comparison real quick. I'll throw all 3 of our zooms onto a slide. Okay, so here's the 3 different versions of this original image I upscaled. We zoomed out a bit, this road's extended, there's more buildings, and then I did it again. Right? And so this whole composition here is now contained somewhere in the middle of this image, and we get a bunch of other stuff generated. So it just helps, I think, to see all 3 of them side by side. And I did the most extreme zoom, double, 2 times zoom, but remember we have the 1.5 times zoom button and the custom zoom button that we have yet to discuss. Oh, and one thing I forgot to mention that probably isn't that important for most of you, but if you try to use earlier versions of Midjourney, you won't have that zoom functionality. Here's my image from V4. Happiest cat on the planet, V4 that I upscaled, no zoom buttons available. With our V5 and beyond images that I've upscaled, I have zoom out 2, zoom out 1.5, and custom zoom. This is a new feature and generally just speaks to the differences between versions. Compare what happens with V5 even. For variations, we have 1 button, as we've already learned. Compare that to V5.2, where we have 2 buttons, very strong and very subtle. All right, so you can't zoom out with earlier versions. Use 5 and beyond. The next parameter we'll look at is aspect ratio, which is --aspect or --AR. We can use this parameter to customize the aspect ratio of the generated image. So instead of a square, which is a 1-to-1 aspect ratio, we can generate, YouTube thumbnail size or common sizes like a 5:4 ratio, 3:2, 4:5, 7:4. You can provide any aspect ratio that you would like. However, there are some limitations on earlier versions. So V4 and before, we're limited to a 1:2 to a 2:1 aspect ratio. For V5 and 5.1, you can use any ratio. However, according to the documentation, aspect ratios greater than 2:1 are experimental and may give you unpredictable results. So the way that we specify the aspect ratio after using --AR or --aspect is to separate our 2 numbers with a colon, just like you would normally write out an aspect ratio. So let's try generating a rectangular, about 3:2 image. And we still haven't really talked about prompting, so we're just going to go with a very simple prompt. We'll use the default version, of course, of V5 or 5.1. Let's generate a, vulture, desert, cactus, sun. And then I'll do --AR for aspect ratio. And let's do do we want 3:2 or 5? Yeah, let's do 3:2 or 3:2. And then I'll be back when this finishes. All right, it's just about done, 93%. And you can see that we're getting rectangular images with a 3:2 aspect ratio. Here's a kind of annoying issue I sometimes run into when I generate images. Occasionally, they won't show up after the job is completed. As you can see here, the job is done, but I don't actually see the image. It was showing me the progress, the 70, 80, 90%. I could see the blurry images, and then nothing shows up at the end of the day. What we can do is go to your profile and go to the list of either all or just look at the grids that you've generated in order. So this is my most recent here, this grid. This is what I should be seeing in Discord that I'm not. And I can click copy and then get the job ID. And then there's a command that I can use in Discord, which is /show. And show expects me to provide a job ID. This will then go get it won't rerun that job. It will just go and get the image from that job, basically the 4 images that were already generated. So if you ever run into that issue, that's one way around it. The image was in fact generated, 4 images. Of course, we see them on the website, but Discord wasn't showing them for some reason. Anyway, there's our aspect ratio. Let's try another aspect ratio just to prove that it works. Let's do something more extreme. So I will do a imagine, /imagine. And let's do a jellyfish disco. And I'll specify AR. This time will be, I don't know, last time we did 3x2. Let's go the other direction. Let's do something kind of extreme, 2x5. And we wait. And there we are. We've got our 2x5 very tall rectangles. Let's upscale one of them. I like this one maybe down here, so that's going to be 4. I'll upscale it, and then I could, open it up in the browser, save it to my machine and use it, or even import it into Photoshop and tweak it and do whatever I want. So it's upscaling that, and let's open it in the web. And here's our nice, very tall rectangle. So that's how you can change the aspect ratio. The next parameter that we'll cover is called style, and it's very simple. You either don't use it or you set it to style raw. Those are the only choices. The default style, which means no style parameter, or -- style raw. When we talk about the Niji model, which is basically a version of Midjourney that helps make anime images, there are other options for the style parameter, but for the default Midjourney model, which is what we're working with for most of this course, we only have one choice. It's either not there or it's set to raw. So what exactly does it do? Well, every Midjourney model has a default built-in aesthetic, basically its own style preferences. And when we leave off style raw, those style preferences have a stronger presence. When we set -- style to raw, like in this example, it will reduce the influence of that default aesthetic, of that inbuilt flavor to images that Midjourney models have. So generally, if I zoom in on this example, the prompt is, do they show the prompt? Pastel fields of oxalis, a type of flower. This is the default Midjourney 5.2 style. It's kind of illustrated, fantasy, high, lots of colors, dramatic lighting, not at all photographic, right? Just over the top, but it emphasizes things like beauty, and it makes things aesthetically pleasing out of the box. With the same prompt, if we remove the style, or using -- style raw, we get a very different result. Still pretty, right? But it's nowhere near as dramatic, as illustrated, as, the lighting is more realistic. Things generally look more photographic. Of course, there's ways of tweaking this. If you want to make a photograph, you probably wouldn't just use the prompt, pastel fields of oxalis. You could say photograph of pastel fields of oxalis shot on Sony A7R or some camera. You can get very specific, and we have a whole couple of videos on generating photorealistic images. But this is just about the parameter style raw. This is a good illustration of the difference. So let me illustrate the difference very quickly. Let's do an imagine dog with sunglasses on, park bench, or something like that. This is using the default inbuilt baked-in flavor aesthetic preferences that come with Midjourney 5.2. I'll do the same thing with style raw. And like all the parameters we're going to learn, the parameters go at the end of the prompt. So after the actual text prompt. And I'll be back when these finish up. Okay, so here's the first batch. This first grid that we got back was using the default styles. So not style raw. And they all look good. They all look pretty photographic, although pretty stylized too. The composition, the reflections, the lighting. I mean, this one, especially here, we're dealing with a dog that is sitting like a human, 2 pairs of sunglasses, by the way, and more over-the-top lighting. If we compare that to the raw version, these look more like something you would take at a dog park if you saw a dog wearing sunglasses. And that's a relatively subtle example. Let me show you another one that I ran earlier. So here I used the prompt, man reading a book on the park or on a park bench. And this is with the style set to its default. So I didn't mention style raw. Very pretty images, but also very pretty dramatic lighting. It tends to favor very handsome and beautiful people, attractive faces. And some of them have a sort of like video game feel or 3D render feel. Here's the same prompt with style raw, where things look a little bit less intense, a little bit less aesthetically pleasing maybe, but also this could be a good thing, right? If we want to remove that default style. So let's try one more example. Imagine I'll do a very simple prompt, coral reef. That's it. And then coral reef with none of the default baked in styles. Okay, these are almost done. Here is the, there we go. Here is the default version with all the style, just normal Midjourney style aesthetic applied. Beautiful, illustrated, fantasy, sort of over the top, everything, vivid colors, not at all photographic. When we remove that style preference, that inbuilt style aesthetic with style raw, we get things that look more photographic, more bland, and clearly there's a big difference. And the prompt is so simple that it's better to illustrate these sort of parameters using a simple prompt. Sometimes it's harder to see much of a difference if you have a very specific prompt. So if I had said I wanted a photograph for both of them, I would probably end up with something that looked pretty photographic. But if I just give it a simple thing like coral reef, that's relying very heavily on the baked-in style preferences that the model was trained on. So we see a night and day difference using style -- raw. And that's the only value that we can use. So we either leave the parameter off or we set style to raw. Okay. The next parameter we'll look at is called chaos, or --c for short. Either one works, --chaos, --c. And chaos is kind of what it sounds like. It introduces more variation into the initial image grids, the higher the value for chaos. So the value goes from 0 to 100, and the default is 0, and that's important to note. So the default starts at 0. As you increase it, you can get more unexpected results, but less repeatable results. Lower chaos values have more reliable, repeatable results. 0 to 100 is the range of values. So let's just do a couple of prompts. I'll have to fast forward once they finish, but let's do one. I'm going to keep a simple prompt that could have lots of possible interpretations. How about banana newt? I love newts. Great animal. So I'll set chaos to 0, which is the default. And then I'll do another one where I set chaos maybe to 20, another where it's 40, and I'll go all the way up to 100, jumping by 20, and I'll be back when those finish. All right, well, I ended up running like 20 different examples just so I had more to show you, because chaos is one of those things that is not always obvious from one grid to the next, but if you run a bunch of stuff, you can start to tell a difference. So I ran this prompt, a sailboat, rocket, hybrid illustration with chaos of 0, the default. And all 4 of these are somewhat similar, right? It's a boat on an ocean. The amount of rocket varies for sure. And the illustration style is similar, at least with these 3. This one's a bit more 3D render-ish. These look like illustrations. Then I increased chaos to 20. And already we see a whole bunch of different types of images, right? We've got like a profile 2D drawing, and then we've got a different sort of drawing. And then we have 2 that look more 3-dimensional. One's at sunset. I don't even know if rocket is involved in this one. This one is basically just a rocket ship. And as I increase chaos more, things start to go off the rails even further. I don't know what's happening here. This is like a cellophane sailboat. This one's just a regular sailboat illustration, like a 2D sort of tech company vector illustration. Here we've got a rocket ship leaving space, beautiful, leaving Earth's orbit or some planet's orbit. It's pretty, but no sailboat. And then here we've got what basically looks like a photo of a spaceship. So a ton of diversity in the results. Generally, I keep chaos low, and there's a reason the default is 0. It will stick closer to your prompts. You'll get more similar results. But if you're exploring, if you're just playing around, you can increase chaos, and not even just playing around, but if you're not sure what you want, if you want to be surprised, you can use a slightly higher chaos number. I wouldn't go up anything above, personally, like above 20 with model number 5.2. With V5 of Midjourney, chaos is a bit more sensitive in my experience than it used to be. So I keep it low if I want to increase it at all. Because you can see here with chaos of 50, none of these really meet my prompt. I've got rocket ship, I've got sailboat, and one of them is kind of an illustration. The others are, I don't even know what to call them. So we just get a lot of crazy variation as you increase chaos, and it does go up to 100, but I'm not even going to show that with this example. Now, here's another example. I did jelly bean ice cream illustration, chaos of 0. Here's jelly bean ice cream illustration. They're all pretty similar illustration styles, composition. It's a cup that's clear, or I don't know what you would, I guess a cup, a glass filled with ice cream and jelly beans on them. Then I increase chaos a bit more to 10. And now the style changes in some of them. The background color changes. Still similar compositions, but this one is more like cartoony. This one's more 3D. This one is certainly more 3D rendery. I don't have the words to describe the styles. And then I go up to 50, and things vary a lot. And we've got a bowl of really weird-looking jelly beans. We've got a cone, and then we've got, I guess those are jelly beans. Almost looks like pills in there. This is more of an illustration. So as we increase chaos, we just get more unexpected results. Here's another example. I did the prompt of banana newt. That's the one you saw me run. Chaos of 0. Most of them are pretty similar. It's a yellow newt looking straight on, pretty much centered at the quote-unquote camera that doesn't actually exist. And then as I increase chaos, this is chaos of 20. Things vary even further, different compositions, different styles. This is a very different style from this, right? This is like a macro photography shot. Is that what you would call it? A tilt shift photo? I don't know what the right term is, but a very, blurred background. And then we have these two that are kind of digital art looking. And then this one just looks like a photograph, and there's a hand in there for some reason. And then as I increase it even further, I don't even know what we're looking at here with a chaos value of 80. I mean, what happened here? This is like a dog covered in yellow cotton candy fur or lamb's wool. And then I don't know what this is either. A really weird looking set of 2 fingers holding some yellow thing. So as you increase that chaos, things just get, chaotic. And this was with a chaos value of 80, which is way higher than I would really recommend going unless you're just trying to have a good time and play around. Now here is an example of how I might actually use chaos. I gave it the prompt of pineapple heron hybrid. I just kept going for fruit plus animal hybrid, chaos of 0. And all 4 of these are very similar. Same composition, same concept, same artistic style, basically a pretty heron. I've got a nest of herons, like 50 heron nests in my backyard, and they're very noisy and very cool birds, which is, I guess, why they were on my mind. So we've got 4 of them looking the same direction from right to left, same sort of crest of feathers, the same, I guess this one has more pineapple in here. You could see like the actual part of the pineapple right there. That's with chaos of 0. Now, if I increment it a tiny bit to 10, we get pretty drastic results where one of them is kind of the same composition, but the other 3 are very different, right? One is a much wider shot, and then 2 of these are almost straight on, and the colors are different. The styles are still the same, but I'm getting more variation. Remember, though, this is me only running it 1 time each, so it's not proof that, chaos of 10 is always going to give you tons of different composition options, but it does show with all of the other examples I've tried to provide in this video that the higher you make chaos, the crazier your results get, the more they deviate from your prompt, especially once you go above something around 20, I would say. Even above 10, you can get some weird results. So if you do want to tweak chaos, you want to be surprised, you want some chaos introduced into your images, start small, even like 5 as a good starting point. The default is 0, and it's quite sensitive. In model version 5.x, let's say 5.1 and 2, so far at least, are quite sensitive to chaos compared to earlier versions of Midjourney. So that's chaos, not one I use all the time, but sometimes. The next parameter that we'll cover is a little bit confusing because it's called stylize, and we just learned about style. And they both control how much of Midjourney's artistic sort of preferences are exerted on the images that it generates. But the way that we use stylize is quite a bit different. We actually provide a number between 0 and 1000. If we provide 0, we're basically telling Midjourney and the model to closely match our prompt and not be as artistic or as stylized. If we provide something like 1000, that's a maximum value for stylization. And we'll have more creative images, more artistic, but they might deviate from the prompt. So the example they use here, I'll zoom in a bit, is of the prompt, colorful risograph of a fig. A risograph is a printing, I think it's a screen printing technique. And with stylize set to 0 here, you can see that it looks like sort of a 1970s thing, I believe is what a risograph is. It looks like a screen print, right? Blocky colors, very bright colors, not at all realistic. And then as we increase stylize, things start to become a little bit more artistic, all the way up to a stylized value of 750 here, where it doesn't look like a risograph at all. It's kind of ignored the prompt. It's using the subject of the prompt. It's getting the colorful part. It's getting the figs part. But the risograph part, I don't know why this won't open for me. Come on. Here we are. It doesn't really look like a risograph at all. They're three-dimensional drawings, I guess, or paintings. They're very pretty, but they're not exactly what the prompt asked for. Now, the default value for stylize is set to 100. So that's everything we've done so far. It's had a stylized value of 100, which is pretty low. But you can go all the way down to 0. You can increase it, and there's two ways of doing it. You can use the stylize parameter, --stylize, or --s. The other option is to use the settings command, which I'll just show you here. Run this command, and we have 4 choices for stylize. And this just sets our preference, and whatever our preference is will be used on all of our prompts. Just like when I change the version, that changes the version from that point on out. So it's not a one-time thing. If you only want to change the stylized value once for one prompt, use the parameter. If you want to always have a very high level of stylization, which I don't necessarily recommend, you'll see that it's now going to set --s to be 750 on all of my prompts. So I'll keep it at the default. That's where I like to leave it. There's a reason it's the default value. It's a little bit of artistic style added in, but it's very close to your initial prompt. It follows your prompt as well as it can. But if you want to change that, you can. And they explain what the different values are right here. So 50 is equal to style low. 100, which is the default, is the same as setting style to medium in your settings. If you set style to high, it will have a value of 250. And if you set style to very high, it will have a value of 750. Okay, so let me demonstrate this. I'm going to use a particular artistic style called a lino cut, which I think is short for linoleum cut. It's a carving. You take a piece of linoleum, you carve into it an image, like this. I had to do it in middle school. I cut myself very bad. I still have a scar from it, actually. And once you've carved that out, you then roll ink over the piece of linoleum, and then you make a print. So we get sort of chunky, blocky strokes. It's an ink print, and I want to try and have Midjourney create something in this style for me. And you can do colored ones too. It just requires different layers of ink. So you can make something like that. So this is the aesthetic I'm going for. So I'm going to go through all the different, not every value, but I'll jump through maybe by 200, the different options for stylize. So I'm going to go with a lino cut print of maybe the California coastal scene. Okay, so lino cut print of a California coastal scene, and then I'll set stylize. More often I'll just use --s. It's an alias, the exact same thing. I'll set it to be 0 in my first one. And I'll try another one where I set it to 100. And then I'll just go up from there. I'll jump to maybe 300. And I'll be back when these are done. I'll go up to 500 and 700, and I'll have a whole set of examples to show you. Okay, so these finished up. And here is my first one, lino cut print of a California coastal scene, stylized set to 0. And it is very close to my prompt, right? It's definitely a lino cut. It looks like a lino cut, at least. The aesthetic is there, and it's a California coastal scene, but I'm more worried about the artistic style. Then we go to 100, which is the default. And it still has the lino cut aesthetic where things are blocky. There's lots of patches of black. and lots of lines and carving lines. Looks like an ink print, but it's certainly more artistic and less of a lino cut. This is a traditional lino cut, 1 or 2 colors, much blockier. This is further away from that. Then we get to 300, where there's still some elements of a lino cut. We have the lines that you can see in certain areas. We have the dark blacks, the black ink. And then we keep going to 500, where now, I mean, this would be really very insane if anybody could make this as a lino cut, as any sort of block print. There's so many colors, so many textures and things going on. It's pretty. Then we get to 700. Again, getting further and further away from the initial prompt. More artistic, more stylized, less close to the prompt. The subject is the same. It's still a California coastal scene, but the lino cut part is different. And then here's 900 finally, where there's still a little taste of the lino cut in some of them, but it's way more of just an illustration, a digital thing, a painting, a drawing, who knows. But you can see that the artistic style from Midjourney has a much stronger presence as I increase that stylized value. Okay, I upscaled 3 and isolated them just so we could see the distinction closer. So here's one from the stylize where the value was set to 0, very much a lino cut. Here's stylize of 100, still looks like a lino cut, more colorful, more artistic, prettier, but still, I mean, even this is very hard to make using the lino cut technique, even though I'm not really an artist at all. And then here's stylize of 700, where you probably wouldn't even be able to tell that lino cut was originally in the prompt. Beautiful, really nice scene, but way more artistically controlled by Midjourney. Here's one more example of stylize I've just already run. I did a longer, much more specific prompt. Acrylic painting of woman's face, bold brushstrokes in the style of Basquiat, neo-expressionism, and this is with stylize --s set to 0. Very close to what I was looking for, very similar to the prompt. Definitely an abstract painting, neo-expressionist, bold brushstrokes, looks good. I increase the value for stylize to 100, and it still looks pretty good. It's more artistic. I think some of these look even a little bit better, although something like this starts to look a bit more pop arty. Again, I'm not an art critic or anything, but it definitely more, it's leaning away from the prompt a little bit. Then let's go to 500. They ran out of order, unfortunately, but here's 500, where things still have some of the bold brushstrokes, some of those qualities, but a lot more artistic, and it's not hewing close to the prompt at all. And certainly when we go all the way up to something like 1000, that's only amplified further. So it's not like it ditches the prompt completely. We still have bold brushstrokes, some neo-expressionist stuff going on, but this now looks something like a modern day, something someone would do on a computer, a digital painting, nice, but different from the prompt. So it's not always a bad thing, of course, to increase stylize. Just know that it does make a big difference. And if you lower that value to something like 0 or 50, it will stick closer to the prompt. One other thing to know is that Midjourney 5.2 specifically pays a lot more attention to stylize from earlier versions of Midjourney, like even 5.1. 5.1 or 5, you would have to do some pretty high values for stylize to see a difference, like 80% higher than you now need to do if you're using 5.2. So there's a pretty clear difference here, whether we're talking about a lino cut or something like a painting with a much more specific prompt. It kind of follows the prompt, but it does a lot more of its own thing. Here, with a high value for stylize or for S, with a low value like 0, it sticks very closely to the prompt. Next, we'll take a look at the no parameter. It's called no, there's no shortcut for it, --no. And it accepts a list of words, one or more words separated by commas, that are basically things we don't want the image to include. So the example that they give is a still life, is it gouache painting. It's a type of paint, I think, a watercolor type paint. And then they do the same prompt with --no fruit. And we get less fruit. It's not a guarantee, though, that we won't get any fruit, right? There's still fruit up here. So that's important to note. Like a lot of things in Midjourney, there's no hard rules. The model still just kind of does what it wants sometimes. But you can at least steer it using -- no fruit. And there's a couple options without fruit, and then you could upscale one of those and generate variations. So it is not a guarantee that it will remove the things that you're telling it to remove. So let's try an example. Let's have it generate busy city block, and let's do a cyberpunk, I don't know, isometric image. So I'm assuming, I ran this a few times, and it will usually generate one that has some people in it or some vehicles in it. And then we can go in and say, actually, we want that same type of prompt, but with no people or with no cars or no planes or whatever it does for us. So I'll be back when this finishes. Okay, this is what I got. It might be small and difficult to see, but there are, I'm all the way zoomed in. There's cars all over the place in these images. So let's try the same prompt with -- no cars, and then we can all add comma people, although it's really hard to see the people in those images. And I'll be back when this finishes. Okay, this is what we get. Now, there's still cars in this image. As we talked about, it's not a guarantee that it will exclude cars completely, but this one has no cars. This one has no cars. This one, I can't see close enough. Yep, it has no cars either. This one does have cars. So it does make a difference. Same thing with people. I can't see any people in these images. Up here, were there even people? Yeah, there's people in this one. So, it's just a quick example. Let me do one more. Okay, so here's an example. I asked it to generate cabin, lake, mountains. Very simple prompt. And here we are. We get some nice images of cabins on the lake with mountains and lots of trees. So I reran the prompt, but I added -- no trees. And now we get 3 of the 4 that have, fewer trees. There's still trees here. There's still trees there, but they're not the focus of the image. This one has no trees. It made a pretty significant difference compared to these where the trees are very prominent. It makes sense. There's a lot of trees by lakes in the mountains. So just a simple example there. One thing I want to call your attention to is that Midjourney really sucks at understanding the relationship between words and actual language. So it doesn't work well to say still life painting, don't add fruit, because it doesn't really interpret the relationship here between don't add and fruit. It just sees the word fruit, and that actually makes it more likely to include fruit. Same thing if I had said don't add trees. So instead of trying to go through the English language and writing a prompt that says no trees, please, or don't include trees, that sort of thing, instead, what you want to do is use the -- no parameter and explicitly tell it no trees. That way, it doesn't matter that it doesn't understand the relationship between don't and don't include or don't add or ignore trees. You just tell it exactly using the programmatic interface, no trees. And remember, you can only use this once, but you can chain together a list using commas if I wanted to say no trees, no clouds, no snow, for example. Okay, so that's the no parameter. Here's a fun parameter. This is the tile parameter. I don't use it often, but I actually use it when I'm generating slides or YouTube thumbnails sometimes. If I need to make a perfectly repeating pattern, we can use the -- tile parameter. There's no value that we provide to it. It's simply -- tile. And it tells the model to generate a repeating image that can be tiled. So in this case, a scribble of moss on rocks or watercolor koi -- tile makes it so that the image can repeat. So let me demonstrate this. So here's an example. I just ran the prompt dark floral watercolor without tile. It makes me some nice dark florals that are watercolors, but they don't repeat well. When I add -- tile, it gives me 4 options. Let's pick one of them. Maybe, should we do this one here perhaps? Yeah, let's do this one right here. So the top left, I'll upscale that one. And I'll go to the web. I'll save the image, and I'll just show you that it tiles nicely. Come on. And here we go. Something that's a little weird about the tiled images when you upscale them is that they will render in the browser as already being tiled, right? There's 4 of them. Is it 4? No, maybe it's more than 4. But it renders a bunch of them. This is the original image that we upscaled. And then this is what it's showing me in the browser once I've upscaled it. But then when I download it, this is the extra confusing part, this is what I actually end up with. So it doesn't create a tiled image that's already repeated. It renders that for us so you can see the tiling in action, but when you download it, it's still just the original image. And so then, now I could come in here and duplicate this a bunch of times and just do that, whoops, a few more times. I'm just using Canva here. And you can see it does in fact work, and it does tile nicely. And then I can fill the whole background with that. There we are. I've made a nice tiling wallpaper pattern. Maybe I could even send it off to be printed from one of those custom wallpaper places. It could look nice on a wall. So that's the -- tile parameter. Like I said, I don't use it all that much, but if I need some repeating pattern, you're not going to have any luck unless you use -- tile. Otherwise, it just doesn't understand language enough, and it might make something repeat, but it's certainly not going to make it line up nicely and actually tile on a page.